Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. We're hanging out in the kitchen today while the cat's away, the mice will play. It's the middle of the work week and I've got a free day. Of course I have plenty of things to do, but some of you may have found that you end up harvesting stuff out of a project or bringing things home with you after you're finished or during a project, and they sit around, and there's a value there, but it's hard to get around to doing that work and get your value out of it, whether it's taking stuff back apart again and breaking it down and putting it away. I find myself harvesting a lot of stuff from various projects, even my own projects, my own home, other people's homes, that I think to myself, oh, this will be great. If, I'll go to the work and the effort to bring this home and clean the nails out of this lumber and organize and stack it, and it'll come in handy. And it's actually happened several times now, which I'm happy to report. But it's not a fool's errand all the time. But sometimes there's more work than you may think to saving money. So today we're going to talk about harvesting PEX fittings or recycling PEX fittings. Fittings, such as these, they are not technically barbed. They're a version of barb fitting. They have these, what is it, two little ridges and then the ridge at the end. It's similar to a barb fitting. But of course you take PEX tube, you slide it over. This has been used. It normally goes over pretty easy. And then you use crimp rings. If you are a DIYer or low overhead kind of a guy, this is what a crimp ring looks like, and you have a tool. It bites onto this little loop, so it's one continuous piece of steel that goes around. Here's the edge of it. The band there, and it ratchets almost through little teeth and an opening to hold it together, and when you grab it with the crimp tool, it squeezes this little nipple, draws that in and crushes it down, which pulls in the sides of this and walks it around, tightens it on to the fitting. And when you're finished, you end up with it clamped on like that. Now I've cut this out, and this is the way a lot of these came back to the shop. I realized they weren't necessary, whether I installed them and changed my mind, or they came out of the project for other reasons, or you find them in some, plumbing arrangement that you've got and you make changes. These are worth saving, these fittings. This here will run you $4, $5, $6 at the store. In fact, a lot of them now when you go into the store under lock and key or behind a cage and you've got to ask to be let in to get them, because it's semi-precious metal. This is going to be solid brass, and they're individually, packaged for retail sale, and it's the type of thing that goes right in scumbags' pockets, basically, and they must have been losing enough money on it to do something about it. I like to keep them and reuse them if I can. There's nothing wrong with this fitting if you can keep from marking it up and marring it. So when I bring them all back to the shop, they come back just clipped off. I move away from the fitting far enough to be sure that I'm just clipping off the piping, and I bring all kinds of stuff back. I've got valves that I cut out, and of different kinds. I've got elbows and T's that you saw. I've got reducing elbows, and then I've got a lot of these connections that are sweat to PEX. So this little brass cup is sweat with solder onto the copper. But before I can warm this up enough to pull the copper out and clean that little bit of solder out of there, I got to get the plastic off. So you may have noticed we're down to just one plastic band, or excuse me, just one crimp ring left on here, and that's for illustration purposes. I've gone to the trouble, and this is what I was getting at the beginning of the video. It's kind of fiddly to sit there and dig all these steel crimp rings off of these fittings. Now they sell like a socket. It looks like this. It's from Apollo. They'll be available at Depot. This is their the whole tool. It's nothing but a 3/8 socket drive end on there, so you can use any kind of ratchet. Especially I end up using this little socket with a stubby ratchet when I haven't got a lot of room. But it will slide onto the side of a crimped crimp ring like that, and then you can twist on this, and it basically tears that crimp ring apart, and it works okay. Now, of course, you got to have room to clear this handle or work with a stubby wrench. But I'd rather not spend the time on the job site or anywhere really, it's almost never handy, to be undoing these crimp rings and trying to weasel these fittings back out of the hose on the site. I'll just snip, snip, snip and bring it home. Because we're going to end up using this pot of boiling water to soften the pecs and slide it off the fitting. So the problem with this then becomes when you get home and you don't leave yourself a long leg of hose all the way around, which of course you could, you haven't got the leverage to run this tool easily. It's hard for me to hang on to this little bit of stuff enough to twist it off. So I've actually adopted a different method. I use a pair of front cutters, front cutting diagonal pliers, and you could just start. I'm not worried about the crimp nipple or whatever you want to call that geometry. What I'm looking for is the end. See that? The end of the steel band. Because if I can get hooked onto that with one edge of the front cutters, then I'll use one of these little barbs, these little ratcheting barbs, to catch the other end enough, and I did it over and over again real nice off camera, but we'll see if we can get it to work here. Now you don't want to get your finger meats anywhere in and around this area when you're really squeezing on this, and it does take some hand strength, but I've found that getting a hold of that edge, once you pinch it, as soon as you bend that edge up enough, there's enough spring tension in most of these clamps that they open just enough to slide them, right on and off of that pipe again. Comes sliding right off there easy. Now the other tool that spins around, you have to mangle the whole thing because you're working on the little nipple that was crimped. You're still working against the squeezing pressure, and in fact, when you twist that, you're squeezing even tighter, and you're going around and around. You'd be surprised. This isn't hardened, so it has quite a bit of flexibility to the steel before you tear it to pieces to the point where it has compromised the tension and it can be slid off. So I find that this method, being careful not to get my fingers or my hand meat into the jaws here, and you'll get a workflow there. It made quick work of removing all these crimp rings. Long story short, we're in the kitchen today because the next problem that you have is that these ridges, this geometry that's on there, if you look at the hose, it's been smushed. See, the sides of the hose have been smushed by the crimp ring all the way around, down, and it's very malleable, this plastic. Now it is line to line or tightly formed around those ridges, and it's almost impossible to pull axially on this hose, and to get it to come off of here is impossible. So when I get to this point, I boil a pot of water and I put everybody in it. So all that does is heat up and soften the plastic, but it does a real nice job. You want to be ready with a pair of, I like needle nose and channel lock for variety. I like to mix things up around here. Basically, just a minute, or not even, a few seconds, just enough to soften that plastic. If I can hold the brass body of the fitting with the channel lock, and I can get into the wall thickness with the needle nose onto the plastic. Once these have been warmed up, they sort of have a memory, and they go back, they relax off, and they'll come. Oh, I'm actually holding the plastic there. They'll come sliding right off of there, no problem. Now there's a little bit of hard water and discoloration on this, but it's nothing that can't be wire brushed or Scotch-Brite padded off. And between popping those steel rings off with these pliers, when I had 5 to 10 minutes on my way by, and another day like today when I can boil a pot of water, I'll pull all that plastic stuff off, throw that out, and I'll toss these all back into the parts organizer bin. And I'm going to save myself, if I have 15 or 20 components here that I pull back out of packs, that's several $100s worth of stuff. And I think it's well worth it. It just makes it a lot easier to warm this plastic up, so I wanted to show everybody how I go about doing this. All right, thanks for watching. We'll see you.